We'll call the meeting to order. Start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Kolpak. Here. Pepcorn.
Here.
Preston. Here. Strand. Here. Mahoney.
Here. This is a special meeting of the Commission to hear an appeal from Liquor Control Board. Chief Sprague will start us out, and Chief Zabowski will give us his part. I think Lawyer Tim O'Keefe will be speaking for the other party. Steve, want to start us out, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Thank you for your attendance at this meeting. This meeting is the result of an appeal of a Liquor Control Board finding of a violation of Fargo Municipal Code 251509 for allowing minors on a liquor establishment. On May 5th and again on May 19th in separate incidents, minors were cited for being on the site of District 64. And the Liquor Control Board held a special meeting on September 13th of 2023 and found one single violation instead of two independent violations. And so I guess with that, I think I'll turn it over to the police chief.
Thank you, Commissioners. I also have with me Sergeant Jared Wagner of our Criminal Investigations Division. He's got a part of this as well that we just like to lay out for your edification. To start with, I want to go back in time because I think I want you to understand the extent to which we've actually worked with not only District 64 as an establishment, but many other liquor establishments in our city. We take a very proactive approach working with Commissioner Pepcorn, members of the Liquor Control Board, and our auditor, Steve Sprague, and trying to work with businesses to address issues such as underage drinking, over-intoxication, and things of that nature. So I'm going to go back in time to February of 23 just to set that stage so you have an understanding of what we did and what we've discussed with the owners Reno and Chuck. So our first piece of information that I've got is a tip 411 from February 2nd of 2023. And this is an anonymous, we get these tips through 411 on a variety of other things, where the person says, I heard from somebody who worked there, District 64, that when they got caught, a bunch of people were using fake IDs. The owner told them to ease up on it. I also witnessed people who are under 21 being allowed into the bar. Now, as an anonymous tip, not a lot of veracity to that. We just take that as a piece of information. And so as we conducted our licensed premise inspections during the month of February, we had a few contacts at District 64, particularly on February 4th when we were there. And as the officers were going to enter to conduct the liquor establishment check, Reno stopped them and didn't want to let them in initially because he didn't think 3 officers could come in and do a licensed premise check. When we do these, sometimes we may have more than, usually it's just a couple, 2 to 3 officers. Sometimes we may have more depending on crowd size or things that have gone on in the establishment, if there's some rowdiness or things of that nature. So 2 to 3 cops is not unusual. There was a little bit, I think, of tension in that discussion, and ultimately Reno recognized that yes, you should let him walk through. They did the bar check and noted that there was an awful lot of people in there. At that time, there was folks both on the first floor and the second floor. So this establishment, if you haven't been to it, it's a lot of square footage, and there's 2 levels. And as you walk in that door through the alcove, there's a stair going up, and then there's an open area. At this time, they had both areas open, and they noted in the report that there's a lot of folks that, as they were walking around and looking to see if there was any other minors in the establishment. We also got some other information on February 14th that was sent to us from an off-duty officer who got a screenshot of a Reddit post, which is another social media site that goes out to youth, I guess. Regarding District 64, in the post it states the owner of the bar has been advising his door guards to allow minors into the bar and to disregard fake IDs because it allows for more business sales. District 64 has not been questioned about this. Again, just an anonymous tip. There is a social media post, but again, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's violations occurring. Well, what I'm trying to point out is that we had some information, and as we started to look in, that's why we started to look into some of these issues. On February 11th, we did encounter a minor who was over intoxicated and ended up fighting with the police inside of District 64. That individual was a 20-year-old person. And then on the 11th, a large fight inside the establishment. Which leads up to, I think, the bar check on February 18th, where we did have several officers go in and do the bar check. Looks like six individuals to be exact, and I think that was a question and a point of contention. So, again, due to the size and the issues that had occurred there in the days and weeks before that and the information, I think the officers felt that they needed to have a few more officers with them when they did the check. After all of this, we did reach out to Chuck and Reno, and I actually think that Chuck and Reno reached out to us at the same time to have a discussion about the bar operations, police checks, things of that nature. So we met with them on March 8th. 3 o'clock, we met at District 64, myself, Steve Sprague, Commissioner Pepcorn, Chuck and Reno, and then they had some legal counsel with them at that time. And they brought this February 18th incident to our attention. We walked through that with them, explained that, and I think on both sides there was a little apprehension, and I think that we sufficiently resolved that and also discussed with them what we could do to help them operate a little better and eliminate some of the issues with minors in the tavern. And during that discussion, they mentioned that they have a scanner, but it's at the bar. And it's not at the door, the point of entry. And especially when you've got 2 levels, you have a gap, right? So our suggestion to them was that you place the scanner at the door and everyone at point of entry gets scanned. And I also want to point out that through all of these contacts, Chuck and Reno have been very cordial. They've been very good to work with. This was a very good meeting. And as always, we try to find some productive outcomes to these situations. They told us that they would do that and that they would ensure that everyone coming through is scanned. In April, there was no notable incidents. And then in May, there were the 2 incidents that were here today on May 5th and May 19th. And I think one of the questions brought up during the initial presentation was, while they weren't notified very quickly about those. Well, the liquor board, we present information for the month prior. So if something that happened in May would be presented at the June 21st Liquor Control Board meeting, because that information is tabulated for the whole month. So it's the whole month before we actually even get to report and have a chance to look at it and see if there's anything notable in there. So it was already well into June before I was aware of those instances. And I'll walk through those in particular. So the first one on May 5th. This was at right around midnight into this early morning of the 6th. Officers were dispatched to District 64 for an anonymous caller who stated there were minors in the bar. 3 officers responded and went inside and began randomly checking IDs and located 6 minors who were in the establishment, 4 of them consuming alcohol. All of those individuals were subsequently convicted or pled in city court to minor in possession, and and all of them for being underage in the tavern. And the ages of those individuals on that particular date were 2 were 18 and 4 were 19. And then 1 18-year-old and 2 19-year-olds were also in possession of alcohol. And the judgments are on file with the city prosecutor. On May 19th, again around midnight, one of our officers who was patrolling downtown observed two girls, later identified and found to be underage, yelling from the balcony of District 64 down to females walking on the sidewalk. The conversation was something similar to the twins, they were twin girls, asking females to come inside. And the females down on the sidewalk were stating, well, they don't have IDs, so they can't come up. And the two girls said it didn't matter if they didn't have identification. The officer went inside, identified both of these girls, found them to be underage. They were in the company of two other underage individuals. 3 out of the 4 also had drinks in their hand. Initially, they said they didn't have any identification, and they were going to get, they got pulled out of the par because they appeared to be underage, and once outside, admitted that they were under 21 and were identified and were issued citations for, again, minor in possession for the 3 that were in possession, and all 4 for being inside of the licensed establishment. So these instances, because they were very much uniform officer presence, would have been known to the staff at District 64. Our officers don't walk in there without their knowledge, and they would certainly see us taking these girls out of there and these guys out of there. So again, in an effort to work with them and try and find out kind of what happened, we said, look, because in initial contact with them, they said, well, they had fake IDs and it either fooled our scanners or fooled our guy at the door. So I said, well, why don't you, we want to give you sufficient time here. Why don't you look and see if you can find video to show us that these fake IDs somehow made it through the scanner, and then we could have a further discussion. So that was immediately after this incident. Timeline here. So this was in process when we had our June 21st Liquor Control Board meeting. And at that meeting, it's noted in the minutes on the very first page, the second page, Section 3A, General Report from the Police Department. Chief Sobalski had a couple of concerns with underage people in establishments. District 64 had a couple of instances. Chief Sobalski would like the owner to be able to respond. So again, in all goodwill and intention to work with these folks to address these issues, I didn't bring any action before the board in June, and reached out and asked them to look for their video to see if we could ascertain whether or not what they said happened. The next correspondence that we got from them was a letter dated July 19th, which was actually the date of the next Liquor Control Board meeting. So that letter dated the 19th didn't arrive at the department, obviously, until sometime after that. And that letter was from their prior counsel, not Mr. O'Keefe, who is here today. This was a different law firm, in which, in a nutshell, the letter, and I believe it's in your packet, that they believe that these girls and these persons in there on the 5th and the 19th had to have used fake IDs because although they searched and it was too long for them to recover their May video, didn't have it, they were able to find these same people because what we also did was give them some of the clips from our body-worn video of what these people look like so they could go back in their system, try and find this incident. But they couldn't find the May instances from the 5th or the 19th, but they found earlier instances where they were alleged these same girls were on there, and in those instances they used fake IDs. So therefore, they must have used fake IDs on May 5th and May 19th as well, and that was the extent of the correspondence. So after receiving this, obviously we were already to the July 19th meeting, where we again, and it was agendized under item 3B for minors on licensed premise, where I asked the board to continue this now to August 16th, because at the meeting I didn't even have this letter. We were still waiting for a response. Upon receiving the letter, I discussed this with the city attorney and the auditor. And I don't think, or I guess the feeling was, and I would concur that this wasn't exactly an appropriate response to dispel the ordinance violation. And we were then determining that what our next steps would be in terms of bringing forward action before the board. On August 16th, we did meet before the board, and set a special meeting date for September 13th regarding those 2 violations. The other piece of the puzzle to this, well, no, I'm sorry, not in that instance. We set the meeting for July 13th, and the 2 violations were heard by the Liquor Control Board, and they were found to have violated, or they melded both into one issue and recommended the fine. What was also going on during this time frame was shortly after the July 19th meeting, as I was, again, end of July, getting the information for the August meeting, was an incident that occurred on June 24th, in which identified, one at least identified underage person and others entered District 64 without even being carded. This information we weren't able to immediately act on because it was also part of a criminal investigation, and Sergeant Wagner will walk you through that situation so you have an understanding of what this was. We've got some video to show you of that particular incident as well. And I think from the last hearing we heard much discussion about how everyone is carded and everyone is scanned. And I think you'll see differently in this video. And I also want to point out that, you know, as I said earlier, I think Chuck and Reno are very good gentlemen. We've worked well with them. But there's obviously a gap at whatever is happening at that door that they may or may not be aware of, but it certainly is there. So I'm going to turn this over to Sergeant Wagner to walk you through the June 24th incident.
Good. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Commissioners. Let me just clear that off. Like the Chief said, in the early morning hours on June 24th, Fargo officers were dispatched to Sanford for a report of a person who had a gunshot wound. That investigation led us to the downtown area and to the area of First Avenue North and Robert Street. The subsequent investigation showed that the parties involved had been inside of District 64 earlier that evening, and as common practice, we needed surveillance video of them coming and going during that time period. My team wrote a search warrant and obtained video from District 64, which I'll show you here in a second. The clip here shows a door employee carding people as normal, and then our group involved in the incident comes in without being carded. One of those people in that group is an 18-year-old who wasn't carded and was later charged with minor entering a liquor establishment, for which he has a warrant for right now. So we can cue up the video. It's the bottom one, it's open.
I'll let you do that. Control your story.
So this is the main entry point facing south, the vestibule camera. So our group approaches here.
Thank you.
No one in this group's carded. And if I pause it right here, the gentleman in the red sweatshirt was later identified as an 18-year-old who was directly involved in the shooting approximately an hour later. And as you can see, the door employee proceeds to now start carding other people. So the group enters the bar, they engage in a verbal altercation, and then leave shortly after, which leads to 2 different incidents, one right outside this door and the later shooting at First Avenue and Robert Street.
Did you interview that guy? You identified him positively.
We've talked to and interviewed and identified.
Thank you, sir.
Any questions about the video?
Any questions of the chief? Mr. Preston?
Yeah, Chief, thank you for spelling this out more detailed. But I wasn't real clear when you were talking for the May 5th incident. What date did the investigation on that one particular incident start?
For the violations, right on May 5th. I mean, the officers wrote the tickets right there, took those folks out of the establishment, both days, actually.
So perhaps, let me be a little more clear. Investigation in regards to the bar and how, in its operations, in regards to checking.
Sure. So I didn't
IDs.
become aware of that until early June as I started preparing for the June Liquor Control Board meeting, because now I'm looking at all of the events from May. Because this comes to me in bulk, just as the board gets it, with all of the incidents from the prior month. And so I just kind of go through and look what's notable. I mean, sometimes, obviously, if there's a shooting like in June or something like that, I'm looking at that a little sooner. But otherwise, in general, now I'm looking at the whole month. And so at that juncture is when I first noted it. That's why when I went to the meeting in June, I told the board that we had some potential issues here, but I wanted an opportunity to speak with the owners.
Another question, if I could. So at what point was the video requested? At what date?
For the May incidents?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know that I know the exact date it was requested. It would have been shortly either before or after that meeting, the June.
The June meeting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. One more question, sorry. So with the video from the February incident, when did you receive that?
With the one that they referred to in the letter, in the attorney letter?
Yeah, and I think you indicated, yeah,
Okay, so just to clarify, so when we met with them on March 8th is when they showed us the February video.
Okay.
Yeah, they were showing us their video. And so in the letter that followed from the attorney, they didn't send us, well, I should say, I think they did send us some video clips from prior incidents with these same two individuals that were prior to the May incident, but they didn't have the May video.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Steve, at this point, Tim O'Keefe speaks. Is that right? Tim? Keefe, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Commissioners, I'm Tim O'Keefe, an attorney with O'Keefe, O'Brien, Leeson in Fargo, and represent District 64. Minors entering bars and using fake IDs isn't a new problem, but it is clearly a problem. And these two owners recognize that and have taken steps. Even if we're going to talk about steps since May, they do have a scanner at the door. But it's getting worse because there is such an ease to getting a fake ID. You can go online. They're not that expensive and they're really good. District 64 isn't the only bar in Fargo dealing with this. They take it very seriously and are probably, if we did a survey, at the top of the list of people taking every action possible today to prevent minors from entering. And while the Liquor Control Board eventually voted to impose a $500 fine and find a first violation, this is all costing the owners a lot of money because they really want to know what more can we do? Is there a defense we have if we do everything correctly? You as a commissioner are definitely in a unique spot. You, in this type of a proceeding, you not only have made the laws, as a commission, but you are in a position to decide on enforcement of those laws that you've made. And for us, this is an issue about fairness. Maybe not a great example, but if someone were to shoplift from the grocery store, we don't blame the owner of the grocery store for allowing the shoplifting to occur or even to let them get away if they don't want to confront them. Like a shoplifter, the minors that enter bars in Fargo where you're supposed to be 21, those minors are breaking the law. And they're breaking the law under false pretenses. District 64 has clearly marked their entryways that you must be 21 to enter the bar. So that's the first violation, or the first breaking of the law by the minor. Upon entering, when they present a fake ID, that's law break number 2. And if they get a drink, that's the third. So many of these minors are entering and breaking 3 laws. And if the police are available and there, yeah, they're citing them or arresting them. But District 64 has one way in and one way out. And I think many of you or some of you have been there. Chuck and Reno do a good job of training security and having sufficient numbers of security with cameras and now scanners. But going back, if we're talking about the May incident, they had plenty of cameras observing the door, and they had security at the door. And those security officers are trained to ID everyone. If Chuck and Reno know a security guard is not IDing, they are fired. And I'll let them talk in a little bit. But in the present case before you, one reason we're here is because of the lack of due process and fundamental fairness in this particular situation. Cameras that Chuck and Reno have on premises capture video that is recorded, and it's kept for 30 days. In the February incident, within hours, I believe, or a day or two, they were able to go back through all of the video and capture it and present it to the Fargo Police Department immediately upon being informed. In this particular case in May, it took well over 30 days, and in one case, 53 days before the bar was notified by the police that they were pursuing something because of a minor entering the bar. Despite that, the bar owners have proceeded forward. They spend a lot of money on this particular liquor license. They spend a lot of money on making that building very nice, on employing several people, and this is a big deal to them. It's a right that they've purchased and they take very seriously. The key for today, from my legal standpoint, is that it is up to you to determine if there's sufficient cause to find a violation. That's what the ordinance says, sufficient cause. Put another way, in legal terms, is there a sufficient reason to support or justify finding District 64 responsible for a violation in this case? So I'm going to turn it over to Chuck and Reno, and they can talk about some of the details that were brought up by Chief Zabulski.
Good morning. My name is Reno Ilogu. I'm one of the co-owners of District 64. I also handle security. First things first, I want to address what the cops just said. There was a number of misrepresentations. When the 3 cops came into the building, like I said, I was one to talk to them. But the part of the story that's missing is before that, there had been cops basically almost, for lack of a better term, always at District 64. They were always parked outside our door. They were always coming in. And since they brought up social media, on social media posts, there were a lot of posts talking about why is cops always at District 64? There's cops always parked outside District 64. Why are cops stalking District 64? So when that happened, when the 3 cops came in, the rumors started flying that, they were doing a sting on District 64. We were under investigation. And the one my brother doesn't like me to say, but it's my favorite, that I'm a wannabe musician who's running away from his baby mama. I have no kids. I have no kids whatsoever. And those rumors were flying. So when the 3 cops came in, I politely asked them, I'm like, hey, okay, can one of you just stay here at the door with me while the 2 of you go so that we don't keep, so that these rumors don't keep growing. Now there's 3 cops at District 64 walking around. I asked them, they said no. I said, okay, go ahead, your business. And then when they left, I walked outside with them and I apologized and I explained it to them. I was like, hey, this is what's being said and this is why I did it. So I just want to give you guys context for why that happened. Another misrepresentation was the fight with the cop and the customer or the person was not at District 64. It was on city property. They can look at their body cameras if, to refresh everybody's memories, but it was not at District 64. It was on city property. It was outside on the streets. We had nothing to do with that whatsoever. They mentioned social media. Unfortunately, if you go on social media, there's not so many great things being said about Fargo police too. I don't take all of that seriously. I've met the chief. I've met Chris Helmick, great guys. But if you go on social media, you're from prejudice to falsifying records to everything. You see numerous accusations against the Fargo PD. I don't take them seriously. I know these gentlemen. I've met with them. They seem like great guys. So I hope they're not taking social media postings, that they see on social media against us. That would not be fair. The video the gentleman showed on the screen, we found out our security, when we talked to our security, he was like, yeah, these guys come here all the time. I've ID'd them all the time, so I decided to give them that courtesy. I felt it would make them feel special. Like, hey, you come here enough, we know you, so we don't have to card you. Unfortunately, unfortunately, the kid snuck in with them, mingled in with them, and came in. And so, our security will swear under oath that is not a thing that happens anymore. There's no courtesy. I am sorry. There's people that don't like it, but I just went to my car. I'm just coming back in. You're being carded again. We know there's no excuses. They know what it is. Now let's go to the events that we're here for. There's one way in through District 64, one way out. We have the most security of any bar in town. We're equipped with, at this point, over 30 cameras.
36.
36 cameras. My security at the door have body cams, and we have scanners at this point. I don't think anybody else in town, and we also want people, and we do that for protection of customer, protection of our security, and protection of our business. When we first started, we used to find there was a lot of white people, black people, it didn't matter, trying to come in with weapons. And we send it back to your car, no. We used to have boxes of knives, boxes of pepper spray, boxes of all that at the end of the night. That does not happen anymore because everybody knows we want your purses get searched. We take security very serious. So when they say we tell our security to let minors in, why are we doing all that and having body cam, having scanners, having wands? That makes literally no sense. We're taking all these steps to protect ourselves and protect our business, and then we're telling them to just let people in. That would make us dumb, and we are not dumb. Every individual who comes in gets ID'd. Every time the police has asked us for proof of this in a timely manner, we have provided it. My brother Chuck would elaborate on that. Every time they've asked us in a timely manner, we've provided proof that this is in fact the case. The people who came in that we're here for, they had IDs all saying they were 21, all of them. And as not only the owner, but also head of security, I'm at the door. In these situations, I was at the door when the situations happened. I can testify that these people came in with IDs and they were ID'd. And I hope that my word is just as good as the word of just underage people who claimed they came in without ID. I don't see any reason why my word shouldn't be as good as theirs. So I hope you guys take that into consideration. The IDs they presented show no indication of being fake. And once the police requested video footage from us, we immediately sprung into action and tried to get footage. But again, as my brother would point out, they asked us way out of the timeline, with which we have our videos stored. So we were not able to provide them that evidence like we have been able to do in the past. But in conclusion, I'll say we've gone above and beyond, and we did everything possible to avoid that. There's a fake ID epidemic in town that I think everybody is kind of pushing on the bars to try to fix the problem. We're not detectives. We're not, we're doing the best we can. Our security have security training. I have high blood pressure because I'm always there and always at the door trying to make sure everything goes smooth. So I hope you guys take that into consideration. I'll pass it over to my brother Chuck.
All right, hi guys. So I want to point out a few things. First of all, like you said, the process is everybody gets ID'd. If you fail our process as a security guy, and we know in the past we'll fire you like on the spot, that does not change for anybody whatsoever. The chief pointed out that we didn't have footage when they requested, but we had prior footage. That was how desperate we were to try to find footage that there was a broken camera that we had them send back to us just so we could try to see if anything possibly would show that they've been here before and this is the fakes they're using. I mean, I don't see why if they come in and they're using fakes today, why would they stop on Friday suddenly? They had the fakes, they were using them. If we're told in a timely way, there was no way we wouldn't have shown evidence. One of the commissioners asked how soon after the May 5th incident were we notified? The chief doesn't remember, but I have records on my phone. We were notified June 27th. June 27th from a May 5th incident. Prior to this incident, we had 28 cameras, and those camera footage lasted for close to 30. After this incident, I'm trying to cover our business more, that I've added 28, 36, 6 more cameras, or whatever the math there, 8 more cameras, whatever the math there is. And with those cameras, now our footage have even dropped down to 21 days because the more cameras you have, you can only have so much space. But I felt like, look, I got to cover every single angle of this bar so that when they come swinging at us, we have something to show that, look, this is not the case. So 53 days is the math after May 5th was when we were notified. When things happen in the city, the chief and all his detectives and cops, they block off areas because they know evidence is key. They got to get it right away. When they notified me after 53 days, I said, well, you might as well tell me a year later, because 53 days and a year later in the bar world of storing footage, it's the same thing. If I don't have it after 53 days, there was no way for us to show. The point that we're trying to make is every time this happens, for some reason, I don't know what that reason is, we are always the ones, we're guilty. The standard in the legal system in this country is innocent until proven guilty. We don't feel that. It's always you are guilty. Now prove to me why you're innocent. And that is unfair. I don't know why that's the standard for us, but that is unfair. Every time they've been an incident, before they even left, I said, hold on 1 second. Some girl said, one of us, she was getting kicked out and she said she was assaulted and a police officer came. I'm like, don't leave too far, just stand up. Pull the footage in real time and showed. Standing, not one touch while security guard did on her. We just made her leave. But these are the things when we're told in time. So if we relate that incident to this, 53 days later, are we now guilty of assault? It is unfair to think that we could have done anything more in that time frame. Also, I want to point out what our attorney said. He made a great point. Shoplifters, you go shoplift, you don't find humbuckers. Sam's Club, Walmart, you don't find them. It's not them. There's only one person committing the crime there. The same can be related to a bank. If a bank robber robs a bank or a scammer scams a bank, you don't say, oh, you got scammed, but we're going to come find you. You go after the person committing the crime. There's only one person committing the crime. These are kids. They go on websites or however they do it. They put in their names, their last name, their addresses. They send a picture to produce these IDs. They're the ones committing the crimes. We've been able to show time after time that we're willing to work with the cops. I don't think I have anything negative to say yet in our relationship with the guys at the top, the people on the grounds, the ones on the streets. That's a different story for another day. But every time they've reached out to us, we've shown them evidence. So I hope that with
So,
everything,
Chuck,
yeah, go ahead.
just have a question. So there was a violation on the 5th and a violation on the 19th. Liquor Control heard your cases. You could have been fined $500 and in addition $750. You had underage drinkers in your establishment, right?
Right.
So I thought Liquor Commission said, well, okay, we'll try to give you a break. We'll not do the second charge. We'll just do the $500 charge. So you've done steps, your team's done steps to correct the problem, right? But Steve Sprague and Chief Zabowski, we're treating them like every other bar. They have underage drinkers in the bar. It's stats of what we do, even if there's fake IDs. It's a violation of our ordinance, right?
Correct. Yeah, and so we bring all of those violations to the Liquor Control Board, and I don't know what the exact number is. I'd have to defer to Steve, but there's across the city a number of establishments that have been fined, sometimes more than once, for underage in their establishment, minors in possession. So we enforce that across the city and as evenly as possible. And of course, we also pay attention to the places where we see either more complaints or we have more issues. And I think early in the year, that's what we were seeing here, which, I think brought a little more attention. But in both of these May instances, it really had nothing to do with the police. One's an anonymous call. There's underage people in the bar. The cop goes there. There is. Another time, the cop's hearing underage girls yelling to other underage girls to come on up. You don't need an ID. We would be derelict in our duty if we walked away and said, well, we're not going to look into that. And we looked into it, and sure enough, there's underage folks. So, I think that their physical security measures, top notch. But as we've discussed with them at a couple of different meetings and just in discussion, they have a gap in their identification process and their scanning process. Because I think some of these are physical checks and not, quality scanner checks, and that's, hard to discern maybe. But I think that's an area where they, I think, would focus on that point of contact and scanning everyone. And again, that's why we just wanted to show you the June incident as well, because there was a lot of discussion last time about after May, everyone gets carded. Well, we've got an 18-year-old here with a group of other people who walked in for whatever reason, weren't even carded, and then were also later involved in a shooting incident outside of near proximity to the location. So again, I would agree that we will continue to work together, and we've provided a liaison and tried to address that, but I think there's still a gap that may be unknown to them, but I guess it's known to them now as to what's happening at the door.
Mr. Pepcorn.
So, Mr. Chair, just a couple of quick things. So, like you said, there could have been two penalties, and I'll just speak, and you can correct me, Steve. But at the liquor control, they basically talked about all the changes that they've made now, and so I believe the Liquor Control Board was convinced because you had your security group come in and showed they had body cameras, and now they do card everybody. And so I believe that influenced the board to say, instead of having two penalties, just have one. And I do think, like I said, we were at the meeting. We've had multiple meetings, and they're business people, and they know it's a very valuable asset. And I do think they've changed. I think they're a lot more strict about it. And I think they realize now it's like you were talking about. Now no one brings anything in because they know you're checking. And it's the same thing with IDs. If everyone knows you're checking, then they don't come anymore. And so I do think that, I do believe at the beginning when we met, we talked about it, but maybe, and I did a walkthrough, and the scanner was upstairs. And now you got to have that scanner at the front door, and people won't, that'll stop it. So I guess that's my summary, Mr. Chair, of kind of the liquor control. And that's why we went with just one penalty versus two. Thank you.
Any questions from the commissioners from either party? Mr. Strand.
First off, I'd like to commend you folks for being as proactive as you are to make sure that you're curtailing these incidents from happening. I've also toured your establishment, met both of you, and think that your due diligence is pretty significant, in spite of the fact that you had a reason to do that. You had something happen. One of my primary concerns has been equity. Mr. O'Keefe, you mentioned fairness, and I think we're all in agreement if there's fairness. And what I was wanting to discern or ascertain was that the treatment is similar to other establishments. And I'm not yet finding instances where minors in an establishment where the owners were let off the hook. I'll qualify that, though. Yesterday's discussion with the Liquor Control Board, with the Windbreak and the Broadway, were compelling to me because I was looking for action on those institutions and expecting it. I think the community was expecting it. Had that not gone where it went, I think we'd have a different discussion today, perhaps. So that consistency is critically important. that that's the priority, that's the benchmark. A question I do have, though, is what do we do with these minors with illegal IDs? You know, I don't even know the answer to that from our perspective, and how we address those situations. My sense is the Liquor Control Board, by reducing your penalty down to 1, they were, in my head, trying to work with you. And I think we need to work with you. You also have competition. There's a lot of other poly establishments that don't want you to exist because you're cutting into their business. And it's a limited, rare commodity to have a liquor license and to have an establishment. And so your customers could be somebody else's customers. So that's a reality. But my hope is that going forward, you know, the city, in our policies and our ordinances, really in our law enforcement, clamp down every opportunity we can on these illegal IDs. Whatever that means and takes, whatever type of leeway we can provide establishments that can prove they were presented a little illegal ID. I think that is a consideration that's critically important, especially if you're doing everything you can. Last thing I'll say is, yeah, I spend, you know, there's comments on Reddit and other comments about lots of institutions in town, but ordinary folks saying ordinary things, you know, there's been a few institutions where they really kind of are out there saying you can go there, you can get in there. I've also had an Uber driver tell me some of his stories with some of the institutions in town, you know, where he refuses to take somebody from a bar because they're so inebriated and so visibly drunk, or where he knew that they were in the past serving minors. I'm not talking your institution. So it's a big problem. I'm glad you're not at the precipice of this license being potentially jeopardized forever, and I hope that we can all work together to protect your institution, your investment, your integrity, and your work going forward, because it's really important that you are here and that we all are partners.
Sure.
Commissioner Kolpak.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today. I appreciate your entrepreneurship and your investment in Fargo. I also appreciate the mitigating factors you've taken since you were notified of the May incidents. For me, your compelling testimony in the first hearing, which I've watched a couple times now, was, you know, your diligence in checking every person at the door since the May incidents. And the tape today for me is just really compelling that clearly that wasn't happening in June, on June 24th. You let a group in without checking the IDs. So I think the decision by the Liquor Control Board was fair, and it was a compromise, and I commend you for what you've done since, but I certainly will be supporting the recommendation of the Liquor Control Board.
Sure, Peston.
So I have to echo Commissioner Kolpak's comments. Couple of different things that came to light, I guess, for me. One is the video. Obviously, there was a breach in the checking of the IDs with that one. And then, as I understand, with the May 19th incident, the cops actually escorted a couple people out. So somehow you probably should have been notified that that had happened and the video saved. So I guess I'm at that point as well. However, I have to say, there's a couple things I think it seems to me that we need to clean up our process. One is make sure everybody's got scanners, and that needs to be across the board for all liquor license holders. And I don't know where that is. That recommendation has come before, I believe, and it isn't, for some reason, advancing. So I'd like to see that in the near future, because at this point, it's unfair, it seems to me, to require scanners to be used after an incident has actually happened. Secondly, I also would like to actually ask a question about the fake IDs. I know there's a lot of them. You collect them. What happens with them?
They get destroyed. They're just contraband.
No investigation is done?
No.
How come? What,
There's
what
the
would be-
volume, there's no way. We would not even have staff. First of all, it doesn't necessarily have the correct name on there. And you don't know which ones have correct names and which ones don't. Now, if we're on scene, and there's times where we're called and they're there, then we can arrest or issue the citation and do that. But the sheer volume makes it completely impractical for us to do anything, coupled with the fact that many of those are not correct names. Some of them might be, but there's just no way the police department could possibly do that. And so that's why our recommendations about quality scanners, because they will catch those fake IDs. On some of these instances, there wasn't really a scanner being used. They looked at the ID and passed it. And so I think your point is correct on the scanner piece. And we're working with the auditor and other business owners looking at different scanner models. I think the next Liquor Control Board meeting, we're getting a presentation for anyone interested to come and see what, maybe the difference or the level of scanning technology. But for the most part, if you got a good scanner, those fakes aren't getting in.
Can I do a couple more
Just in that comment, could we perhaps ask Liquor Control to look into who might need to have scanners in their bars? There's some bars that don't have a lot of volume or things going on in a sense. And I think, Steve, you sometimes said, do you go McColl's Pastry or not? And so I think that legal and their team might look at that. And I think your point, Chief, is what is the quality of the scanner? How much are they? 2,000, 4,000, how much money they are? But I think we could request as a commission just to have Liquor Control look at that. And your firm recommendation is look seriously at putting scanners in most of the bars, I would assume. Yeah.
And I would reiterate, if an establishment is paying for a liquor license, it's a lot more expensive probably than a scanner is. And if they're going to be taking that risk on, a scanner should be available and used, it seems to me, with everyone coming in the door. Can I ask, in regards to the fake IDs, what kind of infraction would be the possession of one?
What's the charge and fine?
The minor entering a liquor establishment would be a B misdemeanor.
The fake ID.
The mere possession of a fake ID, I
Right.
believe, is an infraction through the city of Fargo.
And what kind of fine?
It's a $400 fine.
Okay, and so what I struggle with here is a little bit is the level of proof. It's a he said, she said kind of situation in regards to if they don't have body cam or video footage and or they don't have evidence on a scanner. This whole fake ID area, it just seems like it requires some kind of strategy to address it. I'm assuming if a scanner is going to pick up a fake ID, there are creative people out there that are going to figure out how to get around that and do a better fake ID. So it's going to be, we're going to be chasing our tail here unless we figure this one out, where they're coming from and go after that.
Sure. Well, I think that's way more broad than our
Yes,
local
it
city
is.
can encompass. But what we are seeing, and we can see it in the liquor reports and situations, is that when the establishments that had difficulty by quality scanners, the Windbreak, for example, had a lot of issues there last year. I don't think they've had one violation that we're aware of for underage since then. And again, it's in this May instance, there weren't scanners being used. And so again, the strategy is, I think, as you said, is that owners should have a quality scanner and utilize it. Under what circumstances, that's up to debate and discussion, obviously, but that is the strategy, because there's no way that anyone is going to be able to get on the internet and backtrack all of these things that are going on. It's almost like trying to follow identity theft. At least certainly impractical or impossible for our department to do that. And so, I mean, that's just one of the, I think, societal issues with the technology, but the scanners are just as good with technology. And again, if I know that you're using a good scanner, I'm not going to your establishment, and they're looking for the places where they can get in. That's just, common sense.
If I can ask, so when the Windbreak was having so many issues, were penalties levied against them for
Yes.
underage?
Yes.
Now, what I look back on all the penalties, and almost all of them were the compliance checks. But you're saying Windbreak actually was penalized.
Well, I don't know if it was from a
Others.
compliance check or if it was from where we went there and found them. I couldn't tell you that offhand, but
I think they were compliance checks.
right. And I think that's indicative of the need for scanners.
But yes, it is. But it is a different circumstance in that, again, you're having a he said, she said, where with a compliance check, you actually have somebody that is part of an investigatory kind of process. So, yeah, I guess I'm trying to get to the point here of fairness and whether this is being applied across all liquor establishments. And in fact, if there are walkthroughs happening, and I know you don't keep record of when those are happening, but that they're being done consistently across all establishments.
Very good. And actually, we have started tracking that. And so we do have that information. We're tracking that going forward. That'll be part of the liquor control report as well. And you can clearly see that we do walkthroughs in many establishments. Obviously, we have a high focus downtown, especially on the weekends. That's where a lot of them happen. But we're in all these places and across the city as calls come up or whatever. Obviously, our downtown entertainment area is a big focus for those kinds of issues because we all know that that's where it's most likely to occur.
Commissioner Strand.
Thank you. I was going to ask similar questions about the experience the city's had with the windbreak. I recall it coming to the city commission to evaluate the recommendation to have the windbreak upon, as I recall, evidence of minors in their establishment to utilize scanners, but to use them selectively, like Thursday nights through Saturday night, and only when the businesses was. And our commission reversed that, or didn't reverse it, upped it, and said if you're going to have scanners, you're going to use them all the time. I'm getting mixed information. What were the fines to them for the windbreak, for those minors in possession, minors in the establishment?
I believe that was in September of 2021. The windbreak was fined or levied an administrative penalty of $500 for minors being served in a liquor establishment.
So thank you. So, Mr. Sprague, the fine and imposition of the penalty was similar. The discussion with the windbreak took it to a level of requirement of using scanners and an agreement to use them, and then we upped that up. I'm glad to hear it. Thank you for confirming that it was a similar fine. But Commissioner Pepcorn, we need to look at scanners in every establishment. If somebody's going to have a bar, we've had way too many instances. We had a young minor driving into North Fargo after leaving an establishment that was drunk and that they weren't using scanners. And I think there was a death in that accident. So this is an ongoing pervasive problem. Then we need to look at how do we enforce somebody who's got an illegal ID. I agree. If somebody is committing a crime and they're getting by with the highest technology of the world and they're getting an amazing high quality IDs, that's illegal. And it's not your illegal actions. It's their illegal actions. And however we look at that legislatively or at the local level, we need to put some teeth into the enforcement of people securing, and anybody who provides somebody a false ID, they should be in jail wherever they are, or it should be a higher level crime. But so my sense is you're getting a feel today from this commission that we're hearing you, we're respecting you, we're looking for that fairness and consistency. You're not going to get off the hook for that incident where they combined them into one. You had minors in there.
Do I have a motion?
Can I make a comment?
Yes, go ahead.
Just to follow up on that. The Liquor Control Board, we had more people testify. There were some videos played. Coming here today to say, yeah, that was a compromise on the part of the Liquor Control Board. They had a tough time getting a second on that motion. Finally happened. They finally voted. But what we're bringing up today, everything I've heard today, 90% of it, I think, was about stuff outside of May. And these two gentlemen have worked so hard with the city. And The question is it fair? Did they have the due process? Because when we're just boil it down to those two incidents in May that we're here about, they did not have the opportunity to pull the video. It wasn't as direct as it had been in the past. And so the fairness of it is lost in those two instances. And while the $500 fine may seem minimal to some, it's the mark of a violation for these two that so many people are getting away from it. And they've brought attention to this issue. They've shown how to do it the right way. And, a couple people got through. They might have had fake IDs. This isn't like a court of law. I understand that. But in May, they weren't given the opportunity to pull the video. It was 53 days later. And so what they're asking is that in the sense of fairness, to make a motion today to find that there is not sufficient cause to hold them responsible for violating the ordinance on those two incidences. They still have to do a job, and it's a tough one. It's a tough one. So that's what we're asking.
Do you have a motion, please?
Sorry, can I?
We're done with the public hearing. We've heard your part. We've all talked about it. And if you blame it not having videos, there are minors in your bar. We saw a video later that showed you were letting people in. You corrected all of that. But the May incidents are what we're talking about. That's what's before us today. In a sense of fairness to all the bars, we have to enforce our ordinances. Otherwise, we don't want the police to enforce on minors in a bar. We don't want minors in a bar. Can I have a motion, please?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
So, Mr. Chair, the point about, so the legislature is where this has to change, because what's happened at our last session, they actually reduced the penalty, and the police can talk about and so it's going the exact opposite direction of what we hoped. And so their fine is $500, and basically the people that broke the law are getting no fine. And so we have we're sending mixed messages. And so I believe as a city, we should at the next legislative session be part of this. And if they want to be a part of it, but other liquor retailers we should go out to Bismarck and try to get a change. So we are sending the same message, the city and the legislature. So I agree with Commissioner Strand that the people that are breaking the law aren't being penalized at all. That doesn't make sense to me. And so
Well, I saw fines in there, so 400 to 1,000 on the minors. In the documents that Steve gave us, they got fines of $400 to $1,000. Commissioner Strand?
I'm just curious if anybody has ever explored probationary action. If somebody has an incident and then they implement everything conceivable to make sure that doesn't happen again, is there any room for probation, like saying, okay, you go a year without any more incidents, this disappears? Or have we ever contemplated action that respects and acknowledges the mitigation that sometimes happens?
So, Mr. Chair, if I can speak real quick. So to me, this is the first step. We had a couple yesterday. If they continue, the next step is that you lose your liquor license for a period of time. And the next step after that is you lose your liquor license. And so
Ian, do you want to comment to the probationary issue?
To the best of my knowledge, there is no probationary period that's been implemented by the Liquor Control Board.
It'd be another topic you might put on your parking lot topics to explore at some point in time. We can't turn the clock backwards on this, but I think it leaves us a way forward to evaluate similar circumstances down the road. Because your actions have been significant, and not everybody's are.
Yeah.
What you've done to nip this in the bud is hugely important, and we need to acknowledge that. We do.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Preston?
For one, I have been one who has been encouraging actually increasing the penalty matrix. So a probationary period to me is not where we want to go in my mind. However, I do think that, and I want to commend you, Chief, and your staff for taking this particular area of law enforcement very seriously. I appreciate it 100%. And you have been, I think, much more assertive about it than perhaps what we've seen perhaps in the past. So I would hate for us to back off from this, because in 4 years, 8 years, 10 years, who knows what the circumstance will be. And we really need to have that strict guardrails in my mind to make sure that this continues to the future. And I do want to commend you for the work you've been doing.
Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Mayor. I would be remiss not to ask the question that's present in a lot of minds. And that is, can we be assured, to what level can we be assured there's no bias in the enforcement of these ordinances and policies relative to the one establishment that's Black-owned versus others? You know, we had Club Africa, we had a whole plethora of stuff there. We don't have many examples of minority-owned liquor establishments. Can we know that, because there's people who wonder that. Are they being targeted? Are they being focused on? Are they being treated differently because of their race? And I'm not saying it is or isn't. I'd just like to have us not acknowledge that question and concern in our community, because I think it's in the background. And I'm not saying it is, but I'm just curious. Can you confirm with us, Chief and Sergeant, that that's absolutely or is? Or how do you process those topics?
Well, our whole policing model is bias-free. We work with the facts as presented. And your check to that really is the commission, the courts. I think as we've done today, we clearly showed the facts that had nothing to do with anything other than we were performing our lawful duties, and uncovered this and brought it before the board for review and decision. But not only do we have training in regards to implicit bias and those types of things, we have a high caliber and character of personnel in our department. And I think, again, Steve's got a lot of data in terms of all of these violations. And if you put that in a spreadsheet, I think you would see that throughout the city. I also think that there is more than just this one minority-owned business in our town, just from the applications and things that I've seen come in as we review those. So I know that there are many minorities involved in the operations of licensed liquor establishments throughout the city. And I think I'm sure that Steve does the same thing in his evaluation. We're very fair, but we also have to uphold the law, and we try and work with people to, if there's confusion, get them on the right page. But, we also have to do our end of that.
Thank you.
So you directed a race question, so he had a chance to speak. So I would like to also.
We're in motion now. We're in action items now, so all public hearing is over, basically. Roll call vote, please.
Pepcorn.
Aye.
Kolpak.
Aye.
Preston.
Aye.
Strand.
Yes.
Mahoney.
Aye.
Can I make one more request? One of the things that would be helpful for us to see is once you start gathering the data on the walkthroughs, I don't know if they're going in the reports that go to Liquor Control Board, but we're not seeing those. And Steve, I don't believe those are usually in the agendas that are publicly noticed or publicly printed. Is there some way to get those reports, at least to the commission, so that we can see what are in those reports?
I would think that I can send them to the commission. There are many times that there is information in there that is not open to the public to see, and it's just for the board or commission to view. We'd have that concern about making it publicly available.
So perhaps sending it just to the commission?
Yep, we could do that.
Okay.
And as long as I've got my mic on, just to comment on the penalty matrix. The way the current penalty matrix is currently set up, this is a first violation of this particular part, selling to a minor. They would have to have up to 7 violations of the same incident in order to have that license revoked. And then as far as the reset or, it's set up currently as an 18-month. So if there are no more violations in the next 18 months, then the next violation would be back to a first violation.
So that's kind of like the probation John was talking about.
Yes, exactly.
Could you send the matrix out to the commissioners so
Yep,
they can
we can
see
do that.
that? And I think the recommendation by Nancy at one time is let's relook at our matrix because we have to match the penalties with severity of the minor.
Nancy and the chief and Kember are
Yeah.
working on a brown bag to have that discussion to see which
So
direction
I
you
think
want
the
to go with
commission
the
has a
penalty
great
matrix.
interest in this and wants to do that. So I think that would be fair to say. The only other learning session out of this is if their tapes go out in 30 days or 26 days, I think if they have a violation in a bar, we might think about Steve telling the bar we may want to pull those tapes. It's just like when you had the shooting suspect in the site. Obviously, you're going to come back and ask for the tapes. But is there a way we can confirm that we could tell them, or can the police tell them, or do something?
It would have
so
to
that-
come from PD because I don't get those, like the
You
chief,
wouldn't know,
I don't
yeah.
get them until just before the liquor control board meeting.
So Chief, could we look at that maybe just so
Well,
they know if there's?
Sure. So two things. We've asked our officers to try and do that piece of follow-up as time allows.
Okay.
But as you can imagine, in some of these downtown instances, they're off to the next situation. And that was apparently the case in this one. But I'd also point out that the establishment knows when we're in there and we pull people out. So I think that's not an unreasonable thing for them to recognize. And they could also follow up if they have a question. Sometimes our cops are busy and they can't do that piece. But we have talked to them about trying to do that just for this reason. And I guess I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Strand, final comment.
Well, we'll see. Steve, your comments about the reports that are disseminated through the police chief, if you could talk that through, maybe I just heard that differently, but it's a public document. If something's shared with an elected official or elected board, it's a public document, even if it's not opened or disseminated or laid on the table. And so let's work through that clarity, because if something's shared with an elected official and a board, it's a public document. Whether, so I'd like to see it too, because I've never seen them. But as you're approaching that, just some internal clarity of confirmation for you that what you are putting out there is okay to put out there. But it is, to my knowledge, a public document.
He and Nancy are looking back and forth, so just bear in mind John's advice on that. Any other comments? Otherwise, we will adjourn. Thank you.